Okay, I'm doing this on a Monday after work. It's 6 o'clock, and what are we working on today? Something that needs to get done right now. Give you a little clue. It's over there, and it leaks. Sit tight, and I'll show you what the hell I'm talking about. All right, so here we are at the rear right of my Ram 1500 Lone Star 4-wheel drive diesel. Almost everything I want. What I didn't realize was mine came equipped with air ride. That's something I could have lived without, if I'm perfectly honest. But after I've had it for 2 years, it rides kind of nice. Problem is some days I will be sitting at a light and this air shock strut, whatever you want to call it, will bottom out. And I will ride on the bump stop, and every time you hit a bump, it feels like someone's hitting the back of your skull with a sledgehammer. And that can't be good on the rest of the frame and everything else either. So I did the reasonable thing, and I asked around, and I said, hey, how do I diagnose this? And I described the symptoms about how I had schizophrenic air ride, where some days it would be fine. For instance, today it behaved perfectly normal. The caveat is I had to leave it in off-road 1 the entire time and keep it under 40 mile an hour so it wouldn't drop down. So the question is, what the hell's going on? Do I have a bad valve? Do I have a bad line? Do I have a bad something? And I did my Google Foo and my YouTube universities, which I often do, and came to find out that these are, well, to put it bluntly, shit. They don't last very long. And from what I've been told by somebody who's owned their truck for well over 10 years, he changes these things out literally every 50 to 60,000 miles. If you go to the dealer, as I did last weekend, and ask what that would cost to fix, they will tell you $2,800. Fuck that. So there's two options you have. One is you can get a Bilstein Air Delete 3-inch suspension kit. You can get a stock height, but I would go 3-inch lift to delete this. And you would have to disconnect all the sensors, and you'd have to reprogram your computer to take out the air ride features, and then you'd have a bunch of dead buttons in your dash. And I thought, that's kind of stupid, although the solution is permanent. Or you can fix the problem. Turns out, the guy that I spoke to in a forum, or no, I found him on YouTube actually, he does these every 50 to 60,000 miles, like I said earlier. And what it turns out is the bag itself is no good. And he said that the reason mine was schizophrenic and it would stay aired up in off-road 1 is because when the bag inflates, the part that the leak is, or where the leak is, gets pinched off because it's expanded out. And that jives with me, because I already listened around for fittings and the pump and the tanks and everything is quiet as a cathedral. So today's video is we're gonna change out this air strut. And when I tell you what I paid for the replacement, prepare to be amazed, because I got quoted $2,800, and that includes them refilling the nitrogen tanks of my air ride system, which is stupid, because the air we breathe is over 78% nitrogen. I do understand that it doesn't contain any water, but if your system has deflated several times like mine has, this system has a redundancy built in where it will take ambient air through an inline filter behind this taillight. So there's air in my tanks already. And for people up north, that's a problem, because if the water in the tanks freeze, it screws up the pump and the bags and everything. I live in South Texas. There is no snow. And when there is, it melts before it stays on the ground. So to hell with that. Anyway, long intro. What I'm going to end up doing is I wanted to try out a new camera, but I'm burning daylight and I don't have a lot of time. So I'm just gonna explain like I do in my other videos, what I'm gonna do. I'll give you a still shot of me taking it apart, and then we'll go over it after I change out bit by bit. So the first thing we gotta do is we're gonna take off my wheel flare, and we're gonna take off this inner fender liner, all these bolts here around the perimeter, and then that one, and then that one, and I'm sure there's a hidden one somewhere. I'll let you know if I find one. So I will join you back once this is all apart.
2 very boring minutes later.
Voila. Okay, so that's over there. And it was all the perimeter bolts. Perimeter bolts. And then it was, there's one here, there's one here. And then it was a pinch point, so you gotta kind of wiggle, jiggle, pull, yank, pull its hair. Tell her she's a dirty little, you know, and all that good stuff. So now, here we are. Before I continue, what I needed to mention is I jacked up the truck here at the shock mount. I lifted it off the ground far enough for me to put a jack stand underneath that frame rail, because you cannot keep it jacked up on the axle. You have to let the axle droop. So right now, my axle is only about a foot off the ground here. But this is all I needed because I just needed the clearance to let the bag droop as much as possible. And then we'll pry into here to get this loose. Next thing I gotta do is loosen that fitting right there. And the air is gonna come out and it's gonna hiss and bang and make a bunch of noise. Now, before you do any of this, the first thing you have to do is you have to go in your truck, you have to go into the settings on your stereo, then you go down to the second page where it says air suspension, and then you enable jack mode. If you don't do that, that pump will go crazy the entire time you're doing this, and you don't want that. So, the next thing I think I need to do is, I don't think I have to disconnect that. That's the level sensor here. It pops off nice and easy right here though. And you know what, I might just do that anyway, just for my own personal mental well-being. So I'll pop that off, though I doubt I have to. And then I'm gonna take that nut off. And it's just a matter of, I'm gonna show you this on the new one, just because it's kind of hard to see from there. So on the new bag here, there's these 3 chintzy plastic tabs, and you just push them inboard. And then you should be able to pull this whole strut assembly down. Now the reason I bought the whole thing was because I didn't want to have to mess with clamps or any of that. This is all, you know, self-contained and ready to go. So it's literally pull off the original one, put in the new one, and that's it. So let me get that nut off. I'll leave an annotation on what size that nut is. I probably should have mentioned what tools you need. So let's do that right quick. Jack stand, jack, 5/16 socket for all the bolts and nuts around here, and then the back 2 there. Obviously an impact to get your lug nuts off. I thought I might need screwdrivers, so I brought them out anyway. Wrenches, obviously, to take off that fitting. And then over there, beer, obviously. And we're only like a quarter of a beer in. And it's only 6:23, so clock's ticking. Let me get that off. I'll show you what this looks like taken off. Hopefully.
A few moments later.
All right, so that popped out really easily, actually. You can get your hands in here, you can work from behind. This was a 12mm brass nut. The airline goes through the nut, through the ferrule, and then there's a tapered little dealie right here. Now, I'm not gonna reuse this fitting just because the new one came with the air spring. When I broke the nut loose, it started to make a hissing noise, and I didn't know how much pressure was on this. So I just kind of sat around and let it hiss away for about 3 minutes. And I kept pushing on the bellows here to feel how tight the bag was. And once it started to give, and I started doing it loose, getting it more and more loose, it finally just went psst, and then the whole bag lifted off of this cup here. So it's not under that much pressure, especially with the system off. When you put it in tire jack mode, not only does it shut off the compressor, but it isolates this line too, so I didn't drain the entire system. As you can see, my front end is still jacked up, and the opposite side is too. So don't be too scared to do this. It's actually not that hard, and I didn't have to disconnect the sensor either. Okay, so the next thing is we're gonna install the new one. So when you install the new one, I can see one of my tabs broke off on the old one too. This is an original one, by the way, and it lasted 111,000 miles. So this went way over its expected life cycle. We'll see how long this one lasts. Okay, so things to note with this. When I installed the new one, the underside here of the bellows and cup, it actually has a taper to it. As you can see, this one's leaning. The fat side goes towards the back. That's all you have to remember. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wiggle and finagle this in there and get that fitting off, push it through here, make sure that I don't screw up the ferrule, the compression fitting inside, and then just line up the tabs, shove it in there, and then line up the bellows down here. Start putting the whole thing back together. So far, this has been a really easy job. Thank God. See you soon.
More moments later.
Well, it's in. Okay, so I had to finagle with that tab in the back. For some reason, the front two wanted to go in just fine. That one was a little bit of a pain, so I kept wiggling it out. I started on that one, eventually got them all clipped in. Taper towards the back, like I showed you. And then the problem I ran into is I jacked up the axle so the cup would engage the axle. But the problem I have now is I can't jack it up high enough to get my jack stand out. So what I'm gonna have to do is put the wheel back on and then lower it back down. And then the system will start airing up before I can get my jack stand back. Yeah, awkward. Anyway, it's actually all in, so it should work just fine. I pushed the line all the way in as far as it would go and then tightened the bolt. This little piece was on the new one. That was just a plug, so make sure you take that out when you get your new one. But in terms of number of Samuel L's this job is, not even 2, honestly. Like, this was actually super easy, and I'm gonna end up doing the other side just to have a match set. I was advised to do that, but I bought this one because I needed it right now, and I'll get the other one probably a week from right now, and then I'll just do the other side. But anyway, yeah, super easy job. Not very many tools needed, not very hard to do. Fuck the dealer for trying to charge you $2,800 and charge you $200 and something to fill your air tanks, because that's stupid. If you do live in the north, when you take out that tail light, the line, the input line for the pump is in there. You'll see like a little like one-way check valve looking thing, which is actually an inline airline dryer and filter. Pull that off, and you can add in airline antifreeze, which I think has lubricants in it too, which is probably good for the pump. So I'm still gonna do that later anyway, just for my own peace of mind. As for this job, like I said, 2 Samuel L's at the most. I think I did the whole thing in 42 minutes and less than half a beer. So, easy job. Anyway, that's all for this one, to be perfectly honest. So thanks for watching. If you're new to my channel, welcome, but if you're regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlist and see if my other interests might be of interest to you. I recently broke 1,000 subscribers, which I never thought would ever happen. So thank you all for that. I gotta get this all back together because I think I have about 30 minutes of daylight left, and I'd like to road test it. So till next time, this is Pwnery Tinkers, and yeah, we'll see you later. I'll give you a couple of still shots after I have it all put back together, just to prove to you I didn't kill myself doing this. Because there's the wheel, and there's the old bag. Oh yeah, cost, by the way. I'll leave you a link in the description below for that, because I paid $121 shipped for that. Screw the dealer. Anyway, later.
Well, the boy does have good hands.
Good hands. Bad taste in cars.
Mother